Hello everyone. If you're here today, it means that you're somewhat interested in the collaboration between corporates and startups. And to be honest, it often feels like Tinder. Both swipe right, they want a relationship, and then they discover that they don't speak the same language, they don't have the same priorities, and poof, one of them disappears after the first date. So let's dive into this. My name is Laurent Kinet. I'm what we can call a serial tech entrepreneur for more than 25 years. Created, grown, and sometimes sold multiple B2B startups to corporates. So I've worked one foot in the startup open spaces and the other one in corporate boardrooms. So I have developed over time an acute translation engine between those two worlds, because having corporates collaborate with startups is like having gorillas dance with mice. It's a challenge, right? So currently I'm CEO of Novable, an open innovation and startup scouting company, and we work for some of the largest firms on earth. We help them with their corporate venturing activities, strategic foresights, and also anticipation of disruptive threats. So I've built a thing with corporate venturing and innovation, and in bridging those two worlds. I even wrote a book about it, Corporate Venturing, a Framework, and we'll dig into that a bit later. So, okay, when we think about startups and corporates, we immediately see in our minds something like two different hermetic worlds with preconceptions. Startups think corporates are slow, bureaucratic dinosaurs, and corporates think that startups are chaotic, unreliable kids. And the thing is, they're both right. And it's true that it's a bit like David versus Goliath. When a 10 people startup meets a 100,000 person corporate, it feels like this. A bit like Odoo against SAP. Well, sorry, my bad, it should be this way. But today, the power of dynamic is shifting. Goliath needs David more than David needs Goliath. All right, so you're here at Odoo Experience because you believe technology should transform the way we work, and startups are where most of that transformation begins. But the question is, how do we bring their speed, creativity, and ideas into the world of large organizations? So let's first crush some preconceptions. First, corporate venturing is not just corporate venture capital. CVCs are investment arms of corporates taking stakes in startups. It's a part of corporate venturing in general. That includes partnerships, POCs, co-development, venture clienting, and a lot more. And usually when you talk to innovation professionals, corporate venturing professionals, they will mention what I call the big five. M&A, CVC, hackathon, accelerators, venture clienting. But actually, there are way more ways for corporates to engage with startups. Here's a list of 50 possible engagement models that I list in my book, but we'll come back to that again. Second preconception, corporate venturing is not something new. I could go far, far, far back in time. Well, in 1914, one of the earliest examples of corporate venturing, when DuPont invested in General Motors, not just for financial returns, but because GM's growth also meant more demand for paints, coatings, materials that DuPont made. So, and that's more than 100 years ago. Later you have AT&T Bell Laboratories, founded in 1925, IBM Research, 1945, or Xerox PARC, 1970, who gave the world to technologies like the transistor, Unix or the C language, or companies like Lucent or Adobe. So they were pioneers of corporate venturing in action, research, spin-out, commercialization. But fast forward to the 21st century, most large organizations have a corporate venturing activity, more or less mature, more or less invested, but at least an activity that engages towards startups, or more generally, open innovation. A few numbers that illustrate this trend. First, we now have 2,500 corporate venture capital units globally as of 2023. That's 10 times growth over 10 years. Second, 1 in 6 startup deals now involve corporates. That's 3 times more than 10 years ago. Third, corporate-backed funding hit $65.9 billion in 2024, and that's a 20% year-on-year increase. Venture capital alone can say the same, right? And fourth, CVC-backed startups have a 2 times lower bankruptcy rate, and according to the same study, they usually exit at higher valuations. So CVC, and more globally corporate venturing, is already something big, but it might become the next big thing in startup ecosystems. So what has changed? I would pin 4 major changes. First, the speed of change. Our world is facing multiple forces and threats at the same time: climate change, pandemic, AI, geopolitics, and the speed and the size of those tasks are so huge that corporates can't do everything alone. They need external help, aka startups. So they simply don't have the choice anymore. Well, today, technology cycles are shorter than the average corporate procurement cycles. So when AI models evolve in 3 months, a corporate innovation team can take 3 years to react. So, because the fact is that startups are not just suppliers of technology, they are time machines. They let corporates experience the future earlier. So speed is the first. Second, the democratization of startup creation and tech development, to which Odoo definitely contributes, of course. Cloud, no-code, Lovable, abundance and funding. You can now create a tech startup alone in your living room with very low tech skills. Third, there are too many startups out there. A new business opens every 3 seconds, and finding the right needle in a haystack is becoming very, very difficult for corporates. They face a choice overload. And fourth, the other side of the coin, startups face attention scarcity. Today, they receive too many corporate requests, and they don't have a lot of bandwidth, so they need to choose their battles very carefully, way more than before. And those 4 forces are intertwined, they reinforce each other, and so much that we now live in a kind of Copernican revolution in the world of corporate venturing. In the old world, corporates are buyers and startups are suppliers. Corporates were the center of gravity and startups were orbiting around them. They apply to challenges, to accelerators, to CVCs, and they hope for validation. But in the new world, power shifts. Top startups are over-solicited, and for the first time in history, startups are choosing corporates, not the other way around. The best ones have dozens of options, so they look at rankings, peer reviews, founder communities. So before choosing which corporate to work with, before choosing the corporate to devote their time to, they choose. They are doing their due diligence. If approvals are fast, if contracts are transparent, if commitments are real. So yes, tables are turning, and we can see real signals of this shift already, like in Startup Verified, a very recent initiative like 2 weeks ago, exposing the innovation theater from corporates. It's a public founder-led review platform for corporate partnerships where startups anonymously share their experiences collaborating with corporates. And you have, a star rating system on different categories, full details on the collaboration, even advice given to both corporate and the startup. So they're comparing corporates and they're willing to call out when collaborations are poor. There is also an interesting study by Startup Blink, the Corporate Startup Activity Index 2025, and the title stands for itself, and that clearly states that corporates are actively competing in terms of how good their innovation programs are. So they truly advertise. And the report also reveals that more and more corporates are shutting down startup programs that can't prove ROI. So corporates that don't perform are simply disregarded. And this is not anecdotic. There are more than 200 corporate innovation challenges announced every month. Startups apply, they pitch, but rarely get a deal. And why do such initiatives fail? I see 2 reasons. The first is that the best startups don't need charity. They're already over-solicited, as I said. But second, if it's a public call, it will never be a strategic topic. It will be something that can fail and that can be known to fail. If it was strategic, it would never be public. So yes, tables have turned. This is the Copernican revolution of corporate venturing. Corporates are no longer the sun, startups are no longer satellites. The best ones now pull corporates into their orbit. So what can we do better? What can be done better? Both corporates and startups need to adapt to this new reality. And what can they do better? The answer is they both need porosity. Because real innovation doesn't want to be absorbed, it wants to be exchanged. Porosity means intentional permeability. It means allowing ideas, talent, capital and culture flow both ways. From the corporate to the startup and from the startup to the corporate core. If you think about nature, the healthiest systems are porous. They adapt, they signal, they exchange, they don't trap innovation, they let it breathe. And so, true innovation will happen when it comes from the inside, with startups connected to the corporate bloodstream. So in a nutshell, both sides must increase their readiness. Corporates must become venture ready and startup must become enterprise ready. So let's start with corporates. How can they do that? Well, we've worked with dozens of corporates around the world, helping them structure their corporate venturing activities. And we noticed that a lot of them were engaging in projects with no real link with their strategic objectives. They launch a corporate accelerator because the competitor next door is doing so. But the era of innovation theater is over. Management requires real results, they manage a P&L, so how to start something that will deliver value? So to answer that question, I've designed the corporate venturing framework, doing exactly that. It's a guide for making venturing a repeatable, structured discipline rather than a series of isolated experiments. So first, it lists 100 strategic objectives, 100 benefits a corporate can expect from collaborating with startups. Real ones, concrete ones. They're organized in 8 categories, like HR, marketing, technology, or procurement. For instance, you have introduce disruptive innovation or enhance brand image or expand into new geographical markets and a lot more. And through a simple methodology, you identify which benefits actually contribute to your corporate strategy. And once you have identified the benefits, the framework suggests the most effective engagement models towards startups. So we have listed, as I say, 50 ways to engage with startup. For example, talent exchange program, licensing agreement, venture building. And the framework just cross-references benefits with models to identify how to maximize the value through startup collaboration. Let's say that one of your objectives is to expand R&D capabilities. Then you'll know that innovation labs or open innovation programs or technology sharing are the most effective models to achieve this objective. And this is based on our extensive experience working on both sides of the table. So that's one way to increase the venture readiness of corporates. Now let's look at the other side, the enterprise readiness of startups. Something startups need to understand is that corporates have a minimal threshold of requirements to work with startups. So you can have the best technology or solution in town. If your startup is not wired correctly, corporate compliance, let's say, in terms of IT security, governance or finance, it will never work. Corporates will always prefer working with a less advanced technology from an enterprise-ready startup than the other way around. So that's why we developed the enterprise readiness level self-assessment, which is a tool for startups and scale-ups to assess their ERL and derive a practical roadmap to progress on that scale. Obviously inspired from TRL, a technology readiness level, that has a scale from 0 to 9. The ERL has a scale from 0 to 200. It's a list of 72 criteria organized in 7 categories, like IT security, compliance, legal, operations, technology, and even soft criteria like responsiveness or transparency. So each criteria has a weighting score from 1 to 5, depending on the critical level against corporate standards. And you just tick the box when you meet the criteria. And at the end, it will automatically calculate your ERL, but also highlight the critical steps you need to take to increase that score. So startups and scale-ups can use this tool as a permanent benchmark and roadmap builder. It's very useful. So to conclude, I'd like to give a couple of recommendations, advice to corporates and startups. They're not a revealed truth, of course, but pragmatic tips coming from what we observed during these years with Novable. So for corporates in the room, first, be faster, because your 9 months procurement cycle is a death sentence for early stage startups. Better to sign small pilots quickly. Second, be transparent. If you don't plan to buy, don't run a challenge, because now startups can spot innovation theater. And third, be attractive. Well, think of yourself as being rated, because you are. Startups compare you to their other options. So don't ask if the startup is ready for you, ask if you are ready for the startup instead. For startups and scale-ups in the room, a couple of advice. First, be enterprise ready. Corporates don't just buy you your technology, they buy your reliability. So fix the basics, security, compliance, and processes at least. Second, be selective. Your time is your most valuable currency, so pick corporates with real intent and strong track records. And third, be clear. So tell corporates not only what you do, but how you fit into their machine. Because a great product is not enough. You need to look like a partner, not just a pilot. And since we are to do, there might be some SMEs or mid-sized companies in the room as well. So I also have a couple of advice for them. First, think like startups. Agility and experimentation are your competitive edge. So don't let corporate habits slow you down. But also think like corporates. Structure, governance, and professionalism make you more credible when you scale. And third, leverage platforms. Tools like Odoo, for instance, let you scale processes without losing flexibility. And actually, SMEs are the sweet spot. Nimble enough to move, but solid enough to deliver, so you can play that card. Well, to conclude, I'd say that collaboration is no longer a transaction, it's an ecosystem. And the winners will be those who build mutual readiness. And by the way, it's a mutual survival affair. Corporate will die if they can't adapt, and the task is huge. But startup also will die if they don't have corporates as partners. If you bring the best of both worlds, combining creativity and power, then together you can change the world. And the future of venturing is not about corporates helping startups or startups disrupting corporates, but it's about two sides getting ready for each other. For us, finally, both corporates and startups will swipe right, but for the good reasons. Thank you.